everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sandro Bueri. I focus on behavior in business and the impact of the levers that business leaders can pull to drive performance and culture. This is the week that was, your go-to series for fresh perspectives on how culture shapes the success of organizations. Before I dive into our story for this week, just want to reflect for a moment or so on a week that saw me speak or actually participate in a theatre production on culture. This is a production that looks at the learnings from Credit Suisse, a very surreal but very friendly experience in Yerevan, Armenia, with the Institute of Internal Auditors. So a profound thank you to everyone that participated. This week I'd like to talk about FIFA. Not for anything to do with a match result or a transfer saga, but something a lot more fundamental. How does an organisation with a checkered cultural history try to reform itself while actually preparing to manage one of the world's biggest sporting events? FIFA's just confirmed the draw process for the 2026 World Cup playoffs and almost in the same breath announced a new governance reformed package. On the surface, these look like two very separate headlines, but in truth, they're deeply connected. This is FIFA's attempt to prove that it can govern football whilst governing itself at the same time. And that's what makes this story so interesting, because when you've been the poster child for governance failure, every promise of reform has to be actually lived, not just declared. So let's start with where FIFA stands today. The organisation has spent the better part of a decade trying to rebuild credibility after the 2015 corruption scandal that saw senior officials arrested, sponsors flee for the door, and fans lose faith. Under Gianni Infantino's leadership, FIFA has launched integrity programs, compliance audits, and diversity initiatives. But the shadow of its past still looms large. So now, as the 2026 World Cup, which will be hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, edges closer, FIFA is using the spotlight of the qualifier draw to show that its culture is evolving. It's saying, we've learnt, we're different, and we can actually prove it to you. But culture, as we know, is not proven by statements. It's proven by behaviour, by systems, and by consistency over time. So as we do every week, let's start with the leadership lens. From a leadership perspective, this is a classic example of tone setting at the top. Infantino and his executive team are deliberately coupling operational milestones, the draw, with ethical reform, signalling that governance is now part of the performance agenda. But tone setting is never just about messaging. It's about follow-through. It's about ensuring that the federation presidents, the regional committees, and maybe even match officials understand what the new expectations really mean. And that's where culture either takes root or dies. If the leadership's words about transparency and accountability don't translate into everyday behaviours, timely reporting, transparent bidding, merit-based hiring, then the reform effort collapses into pure theatre. Performance management inside FIFA is evolving too. Historically, success meant TV ratings, sponsorship revenue, and tournament logistics. Now FIFA is beginning to measure compliance metrics, audit outcomes, and even trust indicators, moving from how much money did we make to how responsibly did we make it. That's a big shift, and for a global organisation of this scale, it's one of the hardest transitions there is. Let's now turn to opportunity management. Let's talk about opportunity because every crisis carries opportunity. FIFA's opportunity is to use the 2026 World Cup as a showcase of institutional renewal. Three host nations, multiple time zones, thousands of stakeholders. If it can deliver that transparently and collaboratively, it sends a message way far beyond sport. But the opportunity also comes with risk. With global attention comes global scrutiny from fans, from journalists, regulators, and sponsors. One single compliance breach, a rumour of a conflict of interest, or an opaque contract could undo years of reputational repair. Managing that risk requires what I like to call behavioural resilience. Systems and people who respond to temptation or pressure with integrity, not instinct. And there's another layer here, stakeholder alignment. FIFA's ability to coordinate national federations, sponsors and governments will test its cultural agility, whether its governance reforms are flexible enough to adapt across context while remaining true to core values. In short, this is an opportunity to demonstrate that good governance is not about bureaucracy, it's about the architecture of performance. And finally, let's look at the levers that FIFA's management can pull. These are the practical mechanisms that allow leaders to shape culture and behaviour. Starting with hiring, FIFA's commitment to hire more compliance, ethics and audit professionals is a strong cultural signal. But the real test is empowerment. Are these people able to challenge powerful insiders, or are they simply window dressing? Hiring is about cultural alignment, not just filling roles. It's about ensuring that the new joiners actually reflect the values that FIFA really wants to embody. Tone setting is obviously front and centre. FIFA's leaders are communicating new priorities and shaping expectations, but crucially they're now expected to confirm that those messages are understood and implemented. Tone setting is not about slogans, it's about checking comprehensions. Do the regional leaders know what integrity means in practice? Are behaviours consistent across 211 member associations? So it's important that the tone setters follow up, not just speak up. Training is also important. Culture change requires learning. It's good to know that FIFA is rolling out governance, ethics and anti-corruption training worldwide. But for training to matter, it must connect emotionally. It must show how integrity actually improves outcome, not just avoids punishment. When people understand the why these shifts are important, training helps us transition from compliance to true conviction. Incentives and disincentives matter. Human behaviour follows consequences. FIFA's challenge is to design incentives that reward transparency and collaboration, and penalties that deter misconduct. For example, federations meeting governance standards could gain extra funding or hosting privileges, while those failing audits face sanctions or public disclosure. This lever is where reform becomes real, when doing the right thing is not just moral, it's actually advantageous. Finally, how FIFA measures performance and success will decide if reform lasts. Performance reviews must include behavioural indicators, openness, accountability, collaboration, alongside the traditional KPIs. Only then will the system reinforce the culture it claims to value. When all these 5 levers pull in the same direction, change stops being a project and becomes a pattern. That's what FIFA now needs, behavioural consistency that outlives any one leader. So what's my takeaway? The FIFA story this week isn't really about sport, it's about trust. Can an organisation that lost it so publicly rebuild it through structure, leadership and behavioural discipline? The answer will depend on whether these reforms penetrate the invisible spaces, the conversations, the decisions and the trade-offs that nobody sees televised. Because culture isn't the glossy video or the new code of conduct, it's the unseen choreography of everyday actions. So FIFA is playing two games at once, one on the pitch and one in the boardroom. And in the long run, it's the off-the-pitch performance that will decide whether fans, sponsors and nations start to believe again. That's it for this week's episode of The Week That Was. I really hope you found this useful. Please don't forget to press like, to subscribe and to share your thoughts below. And please remember, as always, culture isn't what you say, it's actually what you do when no one's watching. Thank you for watching and see you again next time.